Stockpile for war is what the European Union are being told. They're being told to stockpile 72 hours worth of supplies. This comes as the Ukrainians are reporting more North Korean troops on the ground in the conflict zone. Also, there's more talks today in Paris with regards to a peacekeeping force in Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, I've said many times there's no peacekeeping force going to go into Ukraine because there's going to be no peacekeeping force needed because there's not going to be a ceasefire. I would speculate that these guys are not talking about ceasefire agreements and peacekeeping troops. These guys are actually talking about warfighting troops, warfighting deployments. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, I've been talking about this a long time. What I want to know from the government is what are the rules of engagement going to be for the soldiers and how long is that deployment going to be? I'm speculating now that as soon as boots are on the ground in Ukraine, that is a minimum 20-year deployment for those troops. You could literally have fathers going out there and not coming back, and then their own sons going out to the same conflict and not coming back as well. That's how long that is, ladies and gentlemen. I know stories about people that's happened to people in Afghanistan. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, let's just get straight into it, and we will go to the shared map, and I'll tell you why there is going to be no such thing as a ceasefire right now. So this is the, in fact, let me, so this is a map of Ukraine. This is the war map. If you guys have not seen it, obviously you've got Ukraine, you've got Kiev, you've got the River Dnipro that bisects the country more or less east-west in equal amounts. Obviously, if you take in the occupied area as as Ukraine, which it is. Right, I'm going to zoom in now because the area of interest here is this town. The Ukrainians are calling this a city, but if it was in Europe, it would be called a town. Now, look at we've been watching this, and we've been watching the Ukrainians push all the way up. Sorry, the Russians push all the way up here. So what I'm going to do is, this was the situation on the ground on the 1st of February. So I'm just going to click now. Each click denotes a day. What I want you guys to do is watch how much ground the Russians are taking. What I want to do is you guys watch is watch how much ground the Russians are taking and also how much ground the Ukrainians are taking back. So each one of these clicks is a day. And again, this doesn't look like much, but it's all over. And when you add all this up, ladies and gentlemen, over the whole of this front line, it does add up to a significant amount of ground the Ukrainians are losing every day. So here we are now, guys, up to date. So this is the situation on the ground as of yesterday. As soon as the Russians have managed to push up to this road, which, again, this could be any day now, but as soon as the Russians manage to push up to that road, it's game over for Pokrovsk because they won't be able to extract. Right now, I would say the Russians want to keep that road open so fleeing Ukrainian forces can, excuse me. Have I got another one? No, I think I'm double tapping. I'm good. So the Russians want to keep this road open so the Ukrainians can flee. But as soon as the Russians want, they will close that road, and then this will just become, I guess, a slaughterhouse. Remember, that town or city, as the Ukrainians are calling it, Pokrovsk, that is the last key fortress city in the whole of the east. Once that's fallen, there really isn't anything to stop the Russians then pushing up to the Dnipro. I think they'll push up to the River Dnipro south of the city Dnipro. But remember, Putin wants to take control of these key let me show you, of these key towns. So he wants he wants Dnipro, huge heavy industry in Dnipro, lots of steel manufacturing facilities in Dnipro. Zaporizhia, huge nuclear power plant. I believe it's the biggest in Europe, potentially the biggest in the world. We've got Kremenchuk here. Kremenchuk has a huge old Soviet argon gas production. And then obviously we've got Kiev here, which is on the other side. So all these towns, and Poltava, lots of gas producing regions in Poltava. So there's lots of stuff here for Putin to take control of, and it's all about money and bringing up the Russian economy. Let's stop that. So if you guys are living, or if you guys were living in Europe, you would be told now by the European Union, the EU is telling 450 million citizens to stockpile 72 hours worth of supplies. And I'll put all these links in the description. Stockpile 72 hours worth of supplies amid risks of war. This is articles that are coming out in the mainstream now, guys. The recommendation comes as the 72 nation bloc reevaluates its security strategies in the face of growing threats from war, cyber attacks, and then obviously climate change and disease. Remember how they're calling it climate change now? They're not calling it oh, but yeah, I suppose it is climate change. So, ladies and gentlemen, when people put out these calls, they don't do these, you know, they don't do this. They don't do this without conviction, because if you've heard about the story about the boy who cried wolf, well, if you cry wolf too many times, nobody's going to listen to you. So it is a big thing, ladies and gentlemen. And right now, if you're watching this, at a bare minimum, you should have 72, you know, at least 3 days water. So work off 3 liters of water per person per day. Just put it somewhere and keep it safe, ladies and gentlemen. If you live in the United Kingdom, I don't believe anyone in the United Kingdom is going to run out of food. What I do think will happen is we'll come to a situation whereby in the United Kingdom, we don't always have a certain type of food. So you might have to shop around a little bit to get onions. You might have to shop around a bit to get asparagus or whatever crazy things you guys have been, you guys have become self-reliant on. But I don't think the United Kingdom is going to run out of food. I think there will be food shortages. Then there's a difference between food shortages and running out of food. Today, also in Paris, I believe it is, Ukraine war latest, dozens of nations gather for Paris summit as Starmer accuses Putin of hollow promises. Now, I've said this was coming, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys can remember when I did a video, like I will link it in the end because it's quite a recent one. I told you guys exactly how this would go. I told you guys exactly how these peace negotiations, how these, how these talks would go. Putin would play Trump, and Putin is playing Trump. The Russians are very good. I've worked out there. I understand that culture. They'll come out and they'll say, yes, of course, we want to enter into ceasefire negotiation, but we have our own problems with the yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. And they will just be kicking the can down the road. All these things can be done instantly if Putin just says, right, lads, stop shooting. That's it. It's done. It's finished. But they'll be kicking the can down the road. They'll be saying, yes, we agree to this ceasefire, but the British won't let us. Listen, and I'm like in previous videos, I've said this. The ceasefire, peace negotiations, they will stall. The Russians will stall and stall and stall and stall, then blame the British. That is what is coming, ladies and gentlemen. So right now, we've got this situation whereby there's been a ceasefire agreed in the Black Sea. But as I understand it, and again, you've got to understand the absurdity of a ceasefire in the Black Sea. The only person that benefits is Putin. The Ukrainians don't. I don't think they. Well, they certainly don't have any ships there. I'm not sure that they have any ships at all. But the only person that benefits a ceasefire in the Black Sea is the Russians. Now, the Russians have come out today, as I understand it, and said they're not going to give the green. They're not going to start the ceasefire unless certain sanctions are lifted. So this is just like a win-win. It's Russian switch and bait and switch. It's exactly what we said would happen. And listen, for all my criticism of Keir Starmer, and there's been a lot, right now he does seem to have the finger on the pulse with these Russians. And again, be under no illusion, it's not Keir Starmer who's making these decisions. It will be the military behind the scenes who are saying, look, this is coming. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen, it is coming. So let's just continue on this. It's another big day of diplomacy as more than 30 nations meet in Paris to progress with plans on security guarantees for Ukraine after a peace deal with Russia is signed. Listen, it's not going to be signed. There's going to be no such thing. All the mainstream media, everybody who's talking about a peace deal being signed, they are all wrong. Do you know why they're all wrong? They're all wrong because they don't know what they're talking about. They're just reading words from a piece of paper that somebody else has wrote that they don't know what's happening. The Russians are never going to agree to a ceasefire right now, ladies and gentlemen. We've just looked at the war map and the Russians are taking ground every day. It's like going into a negotiation and saying, right, if you negotiate negotiate for well, do you know what? It is like going in to negotiate for a ceasefire deal when you're taking ground every day. If you negotiate today, you're going to get less than if you negotiate tomorrow. Why would the Russians do that? Right. Keir Starmer is attending the meeting of the so-called Coalition of the Willing. Follow the latest here. And then we have got, let's see what the main names are. Explain what is the Coalition of the Willing. Yeah, I've covered that, guys. I know more than them. Also from Ukraine now, we've got North Korean, surging North Korean troops in Ukraine. We've got Emmanuel Macron meeting Zelensky. This comes as North Korea's Kim Jong-un sent nearly 3,000 more troops to Russia this year to aid Russia's President Vladimir Putin in war in Ukraine. South Korea's military said that its latest assessment in... South Korea's military said in its latest assessment this morning. Additionally, North Korea has sent more missiles, artillery equipment, and ammunition to help Russia in a move that can increase Moscow's weapon supply, further depending on the war situation, the South Joint Chief of Staff said. So at what point, ladies and gentlemen, do we just admit that this is a world war? We have now got countries gathering in other countries, coming together, forming alliances to fight in a foreign land. At what point is this not a world war? And listen, you know, we have taken our finger off the pulse of what's happening in the Middle East. Remember, the United States are going to go into Iran March 2026. I've been calling this a long time. I've been calling this for over a year, and we can actually see this now. And let's not forget then, ladies and gentlemen, the United Kingdom back in, it seems like a long time ago, maybe last year or maybe even the year before. I will share this with you guys, actually. The United Kingdom put out their own prepping list, and I'll put this as the first, I'll put this as the first link in the description below. The United Kingdom have put out this, have made this website, I guess. How would you prepare for an emergency? And this goes on and it gives you all the government advice on what to do in the case of an emergency. Ladies and gentlemen, people need to, like you guys who are listening right now, everybody needs to start taking their own security as their own personal responsibility, because these things are coming. We can see them. The footsteps now are well defined. We know what's coming. We can't, is there any argument now? What would be the argument be now from the MAGA crowd? And again, listen, guys, I would be, if I was American, I would be part of that MAGA crowd, but I would also be looking at the situation objectively. And I would be saying, right, okay, when's the ceasefire coming? Because every day those bombs are dropping, and it does seem like Putin's kicking the can down the road. The Europeans know this. They've put out their 72 hours notice. They put out that 72 hours notice. The French have issued their the French survival guide. I'm not going to make fun of that. Britain have released their own preparedness website that everybody can go to. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you all need to take your own security and make that like your own personal responsibility. Because in times of hardship, do you know what? The police, the fire service, the ambulance, they've got their own families. Do you think they're going to come to you if their families are needed? Do you think, just total hypothetical question? Let's just say the very worst has happened to the United Kingdom. Whatever you guys think that is, whether you guys think that's asteroid strike, fire, famine, whatever that worst case scenario is. Do you think if you call an ambulance, that ambulance crew are going to come out to you? Or do you think they're going to go and look after their own families? Realistically, guys, what do you think's going to happen? You've got an ambulance driver. Everything's gone wrong. Everything's gone wrong. Total chaos, total carnage, total breakdown in society. Do you think that ambulance driver that's got a load of meds that he or she could be taking back to their family, do you think they're going to come out and deal with your problem, or do you think they're going to go home to their families? It's an open question, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know the answer. I suspect it would be, the latter, go home and look after their families. But tell me what you guys think in the comments. Anyway, guys, I'm going to max a grid. I'll get you guys another video later.